released a rather very interesting insight report that tells you exactly how much the Indiana Fever's social media engagements are actually monetarily worth, either on X or YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, whatever. I mean, all these posts have a monetary value to them based on engagement.
That's right. Forbes just dropped an absolute bombshell on the WNBA, and honestly, the numbers are so staggering that people are scrambling for excuses right now. Because what we're about to show you isn't opinion, it isn't bias, it isn't some hot take from a talking head. This is cold, hard data that just settled every single argument about who actually moves the needle in this league. The Indiana Fever social media just got valued at a whopping $55 million. And get this, it's not even close to second place. Many of you have been saying this for months. You've been connecting the dots. You've noticed the patterns. And today, we're going to walk through exactly why this Forbes report is total vindication for everyone who's been paying attention to what's really happening in the WNBA. If you believe the story behind the story matters, smash that like button. It tells us we're on the right track, and it lets us know you want more deep dives like this one. Let's filter out the noise and talk about what this really means. For months, we've watched this narrative play out where certain factions of WNBA fandom have insisted that the league's growth is evenly distributed, that everyone matters equally, that multiple players are driving the surge in attention and engagement. Well, Forbes just walked into that conversation and dropped a report that doesn't care about anyone's feelings. $55.4 million. That's what the Indiana Fever's social media presence is worth, according to legitimate analytics firms. And that number is so far ahead of everyone else that it's honestly kind of embarrassing for the competition. Here's what makes this so significant. This wasn't some fan-made analysis or partisan breakdown. This was STN Digital and Zoom Analytics tracking over 20,000 pieces of content across Instagram, X, Facebook, and YouTube throughout the entire season. They looked at impressions, they analyzed engagements, and they calculated what it would cost advertisers to get that same kind of exposure through paid ads. The methodology is sound. The data is comprehensive. And the results are absolutely devastating for anyone who's been pushing alternative narratives about the league's growth. Let's talk about what $55 million in social media value actually represents. This is estimated media value, which means it's the equivalent cost if you tried to buy that same level of exposure through traditional advertising. The Fever are generating this massive value through organic content, through posts that fans actively want to see, share, and engage with. That's not manufactured hype. That's genuine fan interest translating directly into business value.
Worth a lot of money. They are worth a lot of money, and I can tell you right now, that's a little over 5 times higher than the next WNBA team. 5 times higher. Let's go down here. Just scroll down. The Indiana Fever's staggering $55 million social media evaluation speaks volumes.
5 times higher than the next WNBA team. Let that number sink in for a second. We're not talking about a competitive race here. We're not looking at first place edging out second by a narrow margin. The Indiana Fever are operating in a completely different stratosphere than everyone else in this league. Second place went to the Dallas Wings at $8.61 million. That gap between first and second is over $46 million. $46 million. That's not parity. That's one franchise absolutely dominating the social media landscape in ways the WNBA has simply never seen before. Now, reading between the lines here, this tells us something crucial about where the actual fan interest is concentrated. The Wings had an incredible year with engagement up 505%. Their social value climbed 304%. Those are fantastic growth numbers that most teams would celebrate. And they still got demolished by the gap. because while the Wings were experiencing explosive growth, the Fever were operating on an entirely different planet. Third place went to the Las Vegas Aces at $7.64 million. That actually makes perfect sense when you think about it. They're the dynasty team with multiple championships and tons of star power. Fourth was the New York Liberty at $7.5 million, which tracks because they're in the biggest media market in the country. But here's where this story gets really interesting for anyone who's been following the narratives all season. Fifth place went to the Chicago Sky at $6.35 million. Remember all those debates earlier this year, all those arguments about who was really bringing more attention to the league, all those think pieces comparing impact and cultural relevance. The numbers just answered that question definitively. And it wasn't even remotely close. The fact that the Sky landed in fifth, even with a player who was supposedly equally impactful, tells you absolutely everything you need to know about the reality versus the narrative. The whole storyline all season was that two players were driving growth and bringing in new fans, two generational talents, two cultural phenomena. But the social media value shows a $48.69 million gap between the Fever and the Sky. That's not a small difference. That's not margin of error stuff. That's a completely different stratosphere of impact and engagement. You were onto something when you noticed that one team's content was consistently outperforming everyone else. The data just confirmed what many of you have been saying for months. Let's talk about how this study was actually conducted, because the methodology matters here. The research analyzed how every team performed across social media during the 2024 season and identified which clubs and content pieces generated the most engagement, impressions, and estimated media value. They specifically looked at content posted between May 16th and September 11th during the season, and the Fever racked up an incredible 38.73 million engagements and 1.17 billion impressions. Yes, that's billion with a B. To put that in perspective, that's actually more impressions than most professional sports teams get in an entire year across all their social platforms. And we're talking about the WNBA here, a league that has historically struggled to get mainstream attention and media coverage. The fact that one WNBA franchise is generating over 1 billion impressions in a single season is absolutely mind-blowing from a sports business perspective. But here's where it gets even crazier. The Fever had a single YouTube video valued at over $700,000 in equivalent advertising value. One video, not an entire campaign or a content series. One single piece of content was worth $750,000. That's the kind of number that makes marketing executives lose their minds, because it shows you how engaged and active that fan base truly is. Think about this for a second. That one video's value is actually higher than some WNBA team's entire social media worth for the whole season. One piece of Fever content is worth more than everything some franchises posted combined. That's not just winning. That's dominating in a way that changes how the entire league has to think about social media strategy and fan engagement moving forward. Now, here's something we need to address, because we know some of you in the comments have been debating this all year. Drop your thoughts below about what this Forbes report really means for the WNBA's future. Do these numbers prove what we've been saying all along, or is there another way to interpret this data? We want to hear from both sides because this conversation matters. Let us know what you think. What's fascinating is that the Fever didn't stop posting content even after the season ended. They just kept that engagement going, kept the content flowing, and kept giving fans reasons to interact with their social media. That's smart business. When you have someone who generates that kind of interest, you don't take your foot off the gas. You keep feeding the audience what they want, and you ride that wave for as long as it lasts. The data shows that strategy is working at a level that's unprecedented in this league. The Dallas Wings' massive year-over-year growth is definitely worth noting, increasing engagement by 505%. And a lot of that probably has to do with Arike Ogunbowale's social media presence and personality. She's been one of the most searched WNBA players and has landed sponsorships with big brands because she knows how to market herself and create content people want to engage with. But even with that explosive growth, she's still nowhere near the Fever's numbers. That just tells you how far ahead the impact truly is when you're talking about generational needle movers. Some people will try to argue that the Fever just had a better social media strategy, or that their content team is superior. And sure, there's probably some truth to that. STN Digital did work with the Fever on some campaigns and content strategy, which likely helped maximize the value they were generating. But here's the thing. You can have the best social media team in the world, and if your players aren't interesting to fans, the content just won't perform. The Fever's numbers are high because fans want to see the content. They want updates, highlights, behind-the-scenes footage, and anything else they can get. The demand drives the supply, not the other way around. This report highlights something the WNBA has been really reluctant to fully embrace, and that's that star power genuinely matters. The league has tried to push this message that everyone is equally important and everyone deserves equal attention. But that's just not how sports fandom works. People connect with individual players. They buy jerseys of specific athletes. They tune in to watch particular stars perform. The sooner the WNBA accepts that and builds its marketing around its biggest stars, the faster the league will continue to grow. The Fever's social media value is also a huge asset when it comes to attracting sponsors and negotiating partnerships. When you can show potential sponsors that your content reaches over 1 billion impressions and generates nearly 40 million engagements, you have serious leverage in those conversations. Brands want access to engaged audiences, and the Fever have proven they can deliver that at a scale no other WNBA team can match. That translates directly into real revenue through sponsorships, advertising deals, and partnerships that keep the franchise financially healthy. It's also worth considering what this means for the Fever's future business decisions. When one player is responsible for generating this much social media value, you do whatever it takes to keep that player happy and on your roster. You build around them. You support them. You make sure they have everything they need to succeed. Because losing them would be absolutely catastrophic for the franchise from a business perspective. The Fever aren't just thinking about wins and losses anymore. They're thinking about engagement, impressions, social value, and all those business metrics that come with having a transcendent star. The Las Vegas Aces finishing third despite being the defending champions and having multiple All-Star shows that winning alone doesn't automatically drive social media engagement. The Aces are successful on the court, but they don't generate the same level of fan interest and content engagement as teams with more marketable personalities. That's an important lesson for the entire league. Championship banners are great, but they don't automatically translate to social media value and fan engagement if people aren't emotionally invested in your players. The New York Liberty being fourth is somewhat surprising, given that they're in the largest media market in the country. You'd think being in New York would provide a massive advantage for social media growth and engagement. But location only matters if you have players and content that people actually care about. The Liberty are competitive and well-run, but they don't have anyone generating those transcendent levels of interest, which limits their social media ceiling regardless of market size. Connecting the dots reveals something crucial about the WNBA's recent growth trajectory. It isn't as evenly distributed as the league wants people to believe. And there's one clear driver of the increased attention and engagement, and the numbers back that up in ways that simply can't be argued against. The Fever's social media value is 5 times higher than second place. Their content generates billions of impressions. Individual videos are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Those aren't the numbers of a league experiencing broad-based growth. Those are the numbers of one team and one player operating at a completely different level than everyone else. For fans who have been saying this all along, This report is total vindication. For people who argued that multiple players were equally responsible for the WNBA's growth, the numbers are a harsh reality check. And for the league itself, this should be a huge wake-up call about where the attention and value are actually coming from. You can pretend everyone matters equally if you want, but the data tells a very different story. This report is also serious ammunition for anyone arguing that certain players deserve higher salaries and better treatment from the league. When you can directly quantify the value someone brings to their franchise and the league through social media impact, it becomes harder to justify paying them the same as players who generate a fraction of the engagement. The WNBA's current salary structure doesn't account for individual star power and marketing value the way other leagues do. But numbers like these make it clear that needs to change. The estimated media value model used in this study is exactly how major brands and corporations think about social media ROI. They look at impressions and engagements and then calculate what that exposure would cost through paid advertising. The fact that the Fever are generating $55 million in equivalent advertising value just through organic content is incredible from a business perspective. That's basically free marketing that would cost tens of millions to replicate through traditional advertising channels. The numbers are in awe, and they're not up for debate anymore. This isn't subjective analysis or biased commentary. This is Forbes backing comprehensive research that definitively shows where the value is concentrated in the WNBA. And if you found this breakdown valuable, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because we're going to continue following this story. Next up, we're diving into what this means for salary negotiations and player movement in the offseason. You're not going to want to miss that analysis. Until next time, keep questioning the narratives, keep looking at the data, and keep demanding the full story. Because in the end, the numbers always tell the truth.